to all of our phenomenal viewers, listeners, and supporters. I am your host, Brianna, podcast Bree Harris, and I am so excited to be here. If you're a new audience member, we are so grateful to have you. Welcome to another episode of Connected, where we discuss all things mental health, recovery, employment, and stories. During this segment, Connected will be focused on managing romantic relationships and how to navigate them while dealing with serious mental illness. We will be sharing personal anecdotes, facts, and awareness from specialists around the Bay Area. Today's guest, Dr. Christopher Celio, is the Vice President of Clinical Programs and Interim Director of Training at the Hume Center. Dr. Celio, who started working in the mental health field in 2001 and originally trained to be a child psychologist, found his calling when he joined the Hume Center as a doctoral intern in 2007. While this shifted his focus to serving adults diagnosed with serious mental illness, he brought with him an emphasis on the family and other systems that consumer is part of, and a creative spirit that believes that healing and recovery can come through many surprising and out-of-the-box pathways, beliefs, and personas. His areas of specialties include clinical boundaries, psychotherapy, behavioral health consultation, prevention, and early intervention, and much, much more. This can all be found on the Hume Center website, in which you can learn more about Chris Celio and the program. Please welcome Dr. Chris Celio.
Thanks for having me back.
Of course, welcome back. We didn't do an outfit change. We just rolled right into another episode. Thank you for being here for an additional however long you're going to be here. And then we'll see him 2 more episodes after that, because that is how good he is, you guys. He is our expert on all things relationships. So even if you are going through things, you can call Mr. Celio.
Let's do it.
Okay. So last episode, we talked about just managing and building relationships. But now, like I said on the previous episode, Chris and I had a conversation prior, and he said that in order to have good romantic relationships, just simple thing is be a good friend first, and just kind of roll into that. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. He's going to once again give us some of his expertise, and we will be out of here. We'll see him on 2 more. Okay. So just kind of want to summarize our last episode. Earlier, you mentioned that one of the first steps into managing romantic relationships is being a good friend. Can you elaborate on the importance of that step for those who did not watch the other episode?
Yeah. So a lot of folks fantasize about going from no friendships straight to romance, right? Movies, society, everything tells us I should be sad if I don't have romance, and I'm worthless if I don't have an other with me. And so I want to go from having no friendships to just magically getting this spouse or whatever partner. But really, to become a good romantic partner, you have to get to know yourself. You have to develop good habits. You have to get rid of some bad habits. And all of those things come from being good friends. With others, and really kind of practicing being in those different types of friendships. So, when I was in high school, I asked this girl out, and later I would marry her. She said yes.
It must have worked.
It worked, but she said yes, and she wasn't quite sure she meant to say yes. Because she didn't know me that well, but I knew her. I had been watching her for a while. It was nice, a nice high school sweetheart story. Started with her like saying yes, but then behind my back, like asking her friends, like, who is this guy? Is he a good guy? Like, I just met him. And they're like, he's a great guy. He's a great friend, right? People are attracted to good people who treat other people well, right? And if you have good friends, you have that base, that foundation where someone's going to feel good trusting you to share life with you, because you've shared in a friendship way life with other people. It's not all about you, and you've been a good friend to others. But also it's easier to jump into romance when you have a friendship circle who can kind of bring you together. Not everyone, but a lot of people have been set up by friends. And so if you have no one you're having that friendship with, how are you going to meet people, right? Maybe you could meet people in the store back in the day, but now everyone's just looking at their phone.
Yeah.
Right? So it's even harder to meet people. So don't fantasize about going right from nobody to that romance. Those meet cutes in movies don't really happen that often, and usually starts with a group of friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool beans. So, romantic relationships can often lead to intimacy and sexual activity. So, how does one navigate consent and social cues?
Very important topic. And the best way to do this is to take it slow and to realize, just like you're not quite sure what you're doing and you're not quite sure how far you want to go, we often think the other person magically has it all figured out. And they don't. So they're probably in a similar place as you. So if you take things slower and take it step by step and not jump steps really quickly, then you can kind of like, each person can take a smaller step and say, okay, did that feel good or not? Am I in the same place as this person? Really getting comfortable asking before you do things and creating that language of consent is really important. And you almost have to practice it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to sound cheesy, but it might be the most romantic thing that person has ever heard. This could be the basis of the trust that gets you to the romance that you're looking for. Because romance changes a person. Sex changes a person.
Yeah.
And you're participating in that, and you want them to feel good about those changes and to feel good about being in that relationship with you and to keep wanting to be in that relationship. So if you could take it slow, and your body, their body might be telling you different things, like speed up, go fast.
Right.
But it'll be worth it. And if you can have the conversations, you're going to have to use words you may never have used before, but really ask about things and be open and ask questions that have space and time for the other person to answer.
Yeah.
And you really got to keep the substances out of it,
Yes, I agree. And know that at any point, any party can change their mind or say no at any point. And so a lot of times it can be misconstrued. Well, I thought she wanted it, or they wanted it, or, they said no, but I think they really meant yes. It's just like, once no is involved, it's like, we should kind of stop. And then just kind of have certain conversations after engaging in any kind of intimacy. Like, was that okay? Is there anything that I can do differently, or what have you? What makes you the most comfortable? And having somebody who listens and cares enough to make sure that you're comfortable can ultimately lead to other levels of different things. So thank you, Chris.
Well, even if they don't say no, but they say, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Be the person who's going to say, cool.
Right.
See you tomorrow.
Right. Or are you going to go back to watching TV? Or
let's do Netflix.
Right.
Actually watch Netflix. Let's do that. Right. Like, it's okay. You're not shooting for that quick moment. You're shooting for a lifetime of romance. That really is some of the biggest bliss that we can have as humans, and you don't want to rush it.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about romance and mental illness, then mental illness might have stolen away those chances to have high school or college girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever these things are. You might be figuring out who you like or don't like, right? You still might be figuring out who you are in those moments.
Right.
So you or the other person might not be very good at talking about this stuff. And that's another reason to go slow. And, watch what you watch on the internet and in movies. There's a lot of fantasy in there that isn't really real. And if that's what romance looks like to you, then you really got to slow it down and be present in this moment.
Or find somebody who is the same way, but that still takes communication.
Yeah, you might find it. That's fine.
Right.
Everyone should have what they're looking for. That's great. But you just got to take short steps to get there.
Absolutely. And thank you for tying it back into mental illness, because that is what we are speaking on. I mean, and anybody can take this advice as well, but we do want to kind of specifically speak on that, which actually brings me to my next question. So we did kind of just hop right in there into the hot seat, but prior to, like, when is an appropriate time to disclose that you have a mental illness when in a romantic relationship or any relationship?
I think this advice would have been different like 10 years ago, but these days I would be pretty open from the start. Maybe you're not pulling open the DSM-5 and saying, here's my diagnosis, because that's your private information. But from the start, these days I think you can say, I get anxious in big crowds, or sometimes I have bad days and good days. Sometimes I might behave a little bit differently. Sometimes I'm in my head and I might not be responsive. I don't know. You don't want to sell yourself short and, end the relationship before it starts. But people are looking for honesty and trust. And the world is a lot more open to hearing about your differences than it used to be. I remember I had someone come into the Hume Center for an interview, and they said, I just want you to know, I get really nervous in interviews. It was this larger-than-life, big, dramatic statement, and I really wanted to laugh at it. But you know what? She killed that interview. She said that, the anxiety drained out of the room, and she was there, and she became a great coworker.
Cool.
And I was like, Chris, get over yourself. You were judging her for saying that.
Right.
And that's what she needed. And she got into her flow. So and just in movies, they're talking about anxiety or different things. And in friendships, we're a lot more open to where we are good or bad in different strengths and weaknesses. And so I don't think you want to save it for some big reveal later, because I think your partner can handle it now. And, life is going to be a lot better that way. Because then you can set up the dates to work for you and them for whatever's going on for them. If you're really anxious in crowds, you can say, I'm really anxious in crowds. So how about for a first date, we go hiking?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what people do on dates these days. But I don't think it's a big secret you want to share. I mean, maybe, again, not the diagnosis, not the big scary thing they can go look up and know too much about you. And that's probably not right. But just talk about the different pieces. Where are those things that are not your strengths? And also mention your strengths.
That makes sense.
Because you don't want them to see you as a diagnosis, because you're a heck of a lot more than that.
Right.
And you can grow beyond it, and you can be different than it. And a relationship, honestly, a healthy one, might be just what you need to get above some of it. But you don't want to use it as a crutch. You don't want them to use it as a way to look down on you or to abuse you, or to think less of you. But just talk about the ways that you're comfortable and that things might need to adapt. It's kind of like, if you have a peanut allergy, you don't want to have your first date to a peanut farm.
Yeah.
You want to be talking about that.
We're Five Guys.
You don't want to go to Five Guys with a peanut allergy. Yeah, that's deadly.
Sorry
Five
to break the
Guys
ice a little bit.
Not be a sponsor on this podcast.
Right. Sorry. Just mute that clip. No, I'm kidding. Yes, I also do want to acknowledge, because we've had our last segment, we spoke with the BIPOC community, and so a lot of the times it came up that back in the day I could not talk about my mental struggles. It was just kind of taboo, and a lot of things are still culturally. So as it may be easier for someone like you and I to be able to speak on it, it's still certain cultures that it's looked down upon, or it's not so freely open to talk about. So it's also something to acknowledge as well.
It definitely is. And on a future podcast, you should bring in the filmmaker of the movie Love Conquers All.
Do you know them?
I do know them.
Okay. Billy, write that down.
Yeah. Love Conquers All is a great BIPOC film about the challenges of talking about mental illness in the community, and then the beautiful story that came out of talking about it.
That would have been a great one 2 weeks ago, but no, we can save it for another episode. But thank you for that shameless plug.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along. So, when should one consider removing themselves from a romantic relationship, especially if you're struggling?
Yeah. So you are really important, and then just let that sink in. You are really important. And the relationship needs to work for you. It should work for both of you, and the two of you should become greater than the sum of your parts, right? It should be something that both of you benefit from. It's not always going to be even, and that's probably okay, as long as it kind of goes back and forth a little bit. But, if it's becoming something that feels like work, and especially, and I'm talking about in a small way, But if it's becoming something, dangerous, hurtful, or threatening, or where, threats of self-harm, like stay with me or I'm going to cut myself, stay with me or I'm going to kill myself. Yeah, it's a time to get out and get that person help from somebody else. That's that's no longer a relationship. That's a crutch. And you're the crutch, and crutches just get used up. But even in a small way, it should really work for you. And if you're coping with mental illness, you might be a bit more fragile. We all are in different days. So it depends on what you're coping with, right? So it depends on where your suffering level is and how much coping energy you have. So you really matter, and of course they matter. So you want to be able to make decisions that keep you healthy and hopefully make them happy. But in the end, if it has to end to keep you healthy and possibly them as well, then that's something you need to approach really delicately, right? Prepare so that they know, the old it's not you, it's me often is true. That's why it's a cliche. But you can't just say that, right? You got to get into that conversation about what you need. A lot of romantic relationships, it's not going to be the one. It should be something that's positive. It should be something that's building into both of your lives and could potentially be the one. So you don't want to go into romance saying, I have to find the one right now.
Right.
You put a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yes. And we ultimately do, because we think that the person, like we're searching for the one.
Yeah, love is fun.
Until it's not.
Until it's not. I mean, how many couples on the TV shows actually stay together after the TV show? Not a lot of them.
Never.
Enough to keep people watching, but not a lot of them. And this is actually the reason why a lot of people out there would say, don't rush in and move in with somebody, which I know is old school advice. There you go.
We're going to touch on that.
It's a little bit boring of advice, but once you're on the same lease, then you got this financial reason to make something work that might not work. At some point you do that, that's fine, in relationships, whatever. Doesn't have to be marriage for a lot of folks. But you should figure out, is this something that should be permanent,
right?
Or am I going to be forcing myself, to be in a relationship that's not positive? And a lot of, violence can happen in those type of such where you're trapped, and so you just want to be careful with that. And it's just like how aunties love to give back babies at the end of the day and go home. Sometimes romance can be greater if you go on a date and then you get out of there.
Right. I get to go back to my living quarters. You get to go back to your living quarters.
Go refresh.
Yeah. That's funny. I can totally relate, especially about the moving in, because my significant other and I just moved in together. And I never really wanted to live with anybody. I've always wanted to live by I'm just a control freak. I just like everything, to be honest. I just like everything within my control. And so we just had to have a conversation last night. And I was just like, you're doing great. I don't want to take away from everything. It's just we have a lot of new layers that are added on top of us, living together. And so we just like to have a real conversation about it and be honest with what I need, especially being with child. I'm ultra sensitive about everything. I'm look, it's probably not you. On a normal circumstance, it could not be that big of a deal because I am so emotional. It was that big deal to me. So these are different ways that we can possibly navigate and figure that out.
I did write a book called Fatherhood Begins Before Birth. And in that book for fathers, the number one piece of advice is when an expecting mom is going through those bigger feelings, the hormones might make the feeling bigger. Yeah. But often it's absolutely authentic. It just might come out bigger than you might think. But telling those dads, stick with the feeling, stick with the underneath. Yeah. Ride out the wave, but don't disregard or disrespect that feeling, even though it's coming out in a big emotional way. That's perfectly okay. If we were going through that, you don't believe the drama I would start. Yeah, I'm glad you're not discounting those feelings.
Oh no, I'm very vocal about all of my feelings. I wear them on my sleeve. I'm like, look, this is how I'm feeling. You may not have thought it was that big of a deal, but I didn't think that was a good joke. And if you might be joking, but I didn't like it. It made me feel a certain kind of way.
Yeah, good. I mean, the more you express yourself, then you get to know the person.
Yeah.
Even moving in together, when you pick out a replacement sink, if yours breaks, you get to know the person, right? And you gotta evaluate. Like, all right, does he like the same sink as I like? Right. Does he want to come out and like spray the dishes, or does he want to be he just it's interesting.
Yeah, that is very true.
Yeah.
I was just like, do you mind if I hang this picture up here? He was like, I don't care how you decorate this house. I was like, cool. Yeah. I will decorate it.
Yeah, there you go.
But I was like, you live here too, so I just wanted to make sure, I'm not just doing stuff willy-nilly because I'm used to living by myself. Hilarious. Okay, Chris, we were having too much fun. Yeah. And that's fine. Well, I think really one of my last questions is, do you have any other tips that we have not covered on how to manage romantic relationships?
We've covered a lot of the things I like to say, but I think really romance is a great way to get to know yourself and just be completely open to that process. You might surprise yourself, but if you're open to learning who you become in a relationship, it'll make you better in that relationship. But it might make you better in picking the next partner too, as you understand that. And as you feel better about yourself, hopefully your standards will go up and you'll find someone who treats you better or can compromise with you on decorating if they don't care about this or that. People who can open up and discuss things with you. We find ourselves compromising away our values a lot when we're really desperate for romance. And there's a difference between compromise to like get along and make a relationship happen versus like stuffing away who we are. So be absolutely true to yourself. You are absolutely worth it. Enjoy the ride of romance. It doesn't have to be lifelong. It can be, and that's wonderful. And just enjoy getting to know yourself. And always, always, always listen to that person. And be a good friend to that person. And let go of that person and let them go hang out with their own friends.
Yeah.
It's so important because you cannot be 100% of what that person needs.
Absolutely.
You might think so. It might be great. It might sound great, but it's exhausting.
It's a point when it's not great.
Yeah, it's not great.
Like, don't you have any other friends?
Yeah, get out of here.
Right. Please go away.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And then compromise on holidays and stuff. And that's a real big landmine right there. And just
whose house are we going to this year?
Yeah, be equal in that.
Yeah.
And even in romance, as you progress in it, consent remains important. So just keep up those communications.
Right on. Well, everyone, this has been another fantastic, super fun episode of Connected. Once again, don't forget to subscribe, share, tell everyone about this podcast. And if you want to be a guest, find us. Let us know. We won't know. Thank you, Chris, for being here. And we will see you the next 2 episodes.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
See ya.